Okay. This is an oral history interview for the Lafayette Historical Society Oral History Project. The date is April 17th. The time is 10:15 a.m. The interviewer is Ryan McKinley, and I am interviewing Paul Melmed in his office in Lafayette, California. And here we go. So if you could just... sorry, if you could just state your name and spell it.
So I'm Paul J. J-A-Y, Melmed, M-E-L-M-E-D. And my birth date is 5/3/42. So I'll be 73 years old next week. A couple of weeks, actually. And my my work has always been with children and students, and then adults, working with people who have had some issues with their own learning differences. I moved to Lafayette from. I guess I could back up a bit. So I grew up in Denver, Colorado, and I went to the University of Northern Colorado. When I went to that school, which is in Greeley, Colorado, 50 miles north of Denver, all my buddies went to CU, to Boulder, and I went to the Teachers College. So I was in special education and received my BA in special ed with an emphasis in speech and language problems. And then I came to Stanford in 1964, and was admitted to the department of, it was actually in the School of Medicine, where I studied speech pathology and audiology, speech and language differences, with an emphasis in hearing and language processing. And then after that time, you're really taking me back here, then I worked actually at the Job Corps, which was in Pleasanton, California, at Santa Rita Prison area, in that area, and it was Camp Parks, which is now all developed. But at that time, it was just a wasteland, and it was an old World War II deployment station, and they changed it into, during the Johnson era war on poverty, that became a Job Corps, and I worked in the education department, basic education with language issues, with students who were having significant problems. These were 16 to 21-year-olds who the Army was even saying no to during the Vietnam War. So I saw kids from Cleveland and from Chicago and from Detroit and New York City and Atlanta and Houston. And these in fact, one of my students was George Foreman, who was the toughest guy on the camp, I remember. And he and so we were trying to work with bringing their skills up to level. And then I was accepted at Berkeley and had my Ph.D. in Berkeley in the School of Educational Psychology in learning disabilities and reading disorders. And at that time, nobody was really doing that much in terms of trying to make a case for people who learn differently and their learning styles. And so I guess I was a pioneer in the field of learning disabilities at that time. And got married in 1968. We'll be celebrating we just celebrated our 47th wedding anniversary, and came to Lafayette from Montclair, where I lived before. And Lafayette was a little village of maybe 20,000 people, and it hasn't really grown significantly since then. But I lived by Spring Hill School and Kalani High School, and lived up the street on Spring Hill Road, and I've lived in the same home since 1975. So we've lived in the same home. And 73, we started looking for places out here, almost moved, but then actually settled down in 1975 here. And I started the Melmed Learning Clinic in 1970 after I finished Cal. And I was on 957 Dewing Avenue in Lafayette, off of Mount Diablo Boulevard, and it was it's sort of nestled in the down now, which is a very vibrant downtown area. But there were a few professional offices on Dewing Avenue, and the office that I rented for 23 years was Dr. Edwin Giroux. And Dr. Giroux was the town doc here before I moved into his office. He was here 35 years in that same office at 957 Dewing Avenue. And then I started renting from him after he retired, and I was there 23 years in the same office. And it was a time where I had to meet professionals that were in Lafayette, and they later became, and at that time they were already established, mostly of them physicians who, pediatricians, who were working with families, and parents of young children would talk with them about how things were going in school. And after I would meet with a lot of the pediatricians, and I was actually a guest speaker many, many times at Mount Diablo Hospital and at John Muir Hospital, speaking to the pediatric group about the importance of doctors getting involved in developmental pediatrics and learning more about learning disabilities and learning differences, so that when they spoke to the moms who were coming to see them with their children, that they would have some knowledge of a field that was emerging. So there was help for a lot of these kids. Many of them were extremely bright, but there was a mismatch between their style of learning and the way the school was presenting the information. And so it was sort of, I guess I would consider it a breakthrough, and it was happening all here in beautiful downtown Lafayette. And some of the pediatricians I remember just walking down the streets of Mount Diablo Boulevard. One is Sheldon Cook, who was here forever. Just a wonderful doc.
I interviewed him.
Oh, did you? Yeah. Sheldon was super. He used to walk. He looked like Gregory Peck walking down the street, and he would come by my office all the time, and we'd walk up, sometimes go around the circle, and. Peter Sheaf was another super pediatrician in the area, and there was a very large pediatric practice in Concord called the Diablo Valley Pediatrics. And one of the veteran, there were two veteran doctors. They both lived here in Lafayette. One was Alan Birkin, and the other was Gene Lipson, and they lived here in Lafayette, and but their practice was in Concord. So they used to refer a lot of kids to the clinic as well. So usually on Fridays, I can just remember walking up Dewing Avenue to Mount Diablo Boulevard, and the Seafood Grotto was there, which was a great place. They had a fresh crab cooker out in front of the restaurant right on Mount Diablo Boulevard, and every Friday during the crab season it was the place to be. And the family was Panfili, that had been here in Lafayette much before I got here. Sonny Panfili and his family owned the Seafood Grotto, and that was a hangout for a lot of folks. Other places were the Sambo's, which was a restaurant down at Mount Diablo Boulevard. We used to take our kids. And of course, Diablo Foods has been here for a long, long time. And so I feel like it's been so much a part of it. It's always been a part of my life. But I think what I'm most grateful for is to be able to live in the same town that I had my professional practice. And I've been in practice for 45 years. And we're right now in an office that I moved to after the 23 years on Dewing Avenue. And this is an Old Tunnel Road. A good move, because downtown Lafayette is so congested now as it wasn't before. Like I told you, we used to just walk around. Now it's pretty tough to park and to be... you want to try to get in and out of there. The restaurants are fantastic and all, but here I am at the East End town and close to the freeway, and it's easier for folks to get in and out. In the old days, families would bring their kids to my clinic for tutoring after I would evaluate them, and they would come twice a week. From Antioch and Pittsburgh and Martinez and from Concord and Danville and all the way out to Pleasanton. But it wasn't so difficult for a mom to pick up the kids from school and drive into Lafayette, spend an hour here at the clinic, and then go back home. Now it's difficult. So with BART, I remember some high school kids that would come over on BART with their girlfriends, and the girlfriends would hang out in the waiting room listening to all the moms talking about their little kids, and the high school guys or girls would be working on their math or reading or whatever else they were working on. And I can remember once getting a phone call from a young woman, and she told me that she used to come with her boyfriend to the Melmed Learning Clinic on Dewing Avenue, and that now she has a child. She was unmarried, but she used to remember hearing the moms talking in Lafayette about their kids and their learning problems, and she wanted to make sure that her child was going to be okay, and would I mind seeing her? And when she walked into the office on Dewing, it brought back so many memories, and here she is coming into the office with her little 7-year-old when I told her that everything's just going to be fine, and she got very tearful, and she said, I remember all the moms talking about so many different things, but you never did anything but to thank them for coming and reassuring them that everything's going to be okay. And I thought maybe you would talk with them about learning problems and all, but now that I see, when I think back, that it became a informal, almost therapy and counter and support for one another. There they were talking about all kinds of things, talking about restaurants in Lafayette and where they get their nails done and who does their hair. And every once in a while, they talk about their kids. So it became a safe place, and I feel that safeness here. When I think back about what my raison d'etre, my reason for being and all of this. If I could put it in a sentence, it's to make, and I think it's been the atmosphere in Lafayette that's allowed me to develop that over the years, is to make parents feel good about their kids. And in Lafayette, that's always been at the forefront of parents feeling good about their kids. I used to support all of the LMYA, which was Lafayette Moraga Youth Association. Used to support all those teams. In fact, kids still tell me that they have their old Melmed Learning Clinic T-shirts for baseball and softball and soccer. And my wife, Ronnie, who's a super teacher, and she has her master's degree in education, and she was a supervisor at St. Mary's College of Teachers, and she taught in San Lorenzo, inner city kids as well. And she and one of her friends, who was a assistant manager of a bank here in Lafayette, the two women coached a second grade soccer team here in Lafayette, and they went undefeated. The second year, all the men coaches would actually come and scout them during practice on Thursdays for the weekend games, right at Spring Hill School and then some other places that they used to play. And they would scout them. And the thing that was different about these two women that made their teams never lose is that they made the kids feel so good about themselves, and the parents backed away, and the kids played as a team, real team, and they listened because these were both. My wife was a great teacher, and the person she was coaching with, had 3 kids of her own, and the kids sort of bought into the fact that we can do this, we can win this, And it spilled over into a sense of well-being, a feeling of confidence, a feeling of self-worth. And like I said, I think that through the years, being surrounded in an atmosphere of everybody's in this together, that we're developing a community here, schools that are really superior, families that look out for one another and coach each other's kids. And then my clinic, where I feel like I've done a pretty good job with a youngster would come in and try to identify all of their strengths in learning and then teach to those strengths, have produced through the years, thousands of kids who are doing pretty well out there. I still get calls from grandmothers of the children who I used to see about their little grandkids. So this is another generation through coming through the clinic. Just to back up on this, what the town was like, I remember the hangout was Luckies grocery store, which is now Whole Foods. Oh, okay. And there was a Freddy's Pizza where kids used to hang out, particularly on weekends. And off of Mount Diablo Boulevard, there's a donut shop that's still there in next to the drugstore next to the CVS drugstore now. The little donut shop, Diablo Foods, all that whole strip. That was it. And then the other place, of course, was Luckies, which was kind of at the other end. And because Spring Hill School and Kalani High School are so close to each other, and I still do, live up Spring Hill Road, which was a torn up street at the time, and you would see, we see so many of the elementary school kids, and then they all filtered into Stanley. So students from Happy Valley School or Burton Valley or Spring Hill, and at that point there was another school that's closed now, but all the schools fed into Stanley. So at one point, every kid in the city went to the same school for 7th and 8th grade, and then I still remember when 6th grade was included in that. There was a lot of controversy about that because a lot of teachers who were elementary school teachers knew, particularly boys, at the end of the 5th grade were certainly not ready for a middle school experience. So a boy who was 10 and a half or almost 11 years old to be in the same school with someone who's 13 years old or 14, that's a big decision to make. And I think they did it for economic reasons. So they opened Stanley for 6th, and 7th, and 8th. But before it was just 7th and 8th. And but the point is that then you have all the kids together, and it wasn't until 8th grade graduation that they would split off again, and then some went to Kalani's, and some went to Miramani, and some went to Las Lomas. So, in a sense, and some went to Campo. So, in a sense, when there were community events, everybody knew each other. It was really a village, a super cool, fun place to be. An atmosphere of, sense of safety, and an atmosphere of, I'm as happy for you and your kids as you are for me and my children. So we raised 3 kids here, and they all went to public school. All from to Spring Hill, then Stanley, then Kalani's. My middle son, in the end of his sophomore year, he was a super duper athlete, and he went to De La Salle for the last 2 years. Not necessarily for athletics, because he was at that point he played all the sports, but at that point he was a tennis player. But things weren't going as well as they wanted us to move out of Lafayette and move to Florida so he could play tennis, and I wasn't going to move to Florida to play tennis. So I said, you can go to anywhere else you want, and he went to De La Salle, and he finished at De La Salle. In fact, his he was Athlete of the Year at Kalani's. And then at De La Salle, he was up for Athlete of the Year, and he lost to Amani Toomer. And Toomer was a super football player for the New York Giants eventually. All my kids did well here in the public schools, extremely well. My son, who I just talked about, David, he went to Berkeley and graduated Cal, and then went to UC Davis Law School. And he lives in Los Angeles now and practices. My daughter went to, after Kalani, she went to UC Santa Barbara, and then she went to San Francisco State, and she has a master's degree in education. And she's raising 3 kids in San Francisco, and they come out to Lafayette twice a week. And it's the same feeling I can remember with my kids that my grandkids are having here in Lafayette, out of the city, and out to this beautiful place with open space and to walk and to play. And our youngest son, Zane, he graduated Kalani's, then he went to Berkeley, Phi Beta Kappa, and he went to UCLA Law School. Unfortunately, we lost Zane at age 26 to a GBM4 brain tumor in 2006. And at that point, I sort of put things on hold in my own professional life, and I officially retired in 2006. But after that traumatic situation, but unofficially, I still see students, and we're here in my office on Old Tunnel Road. Because it's pretty tough. Like I told you, if a grandma calls me and says, "Oh, are you still testing students, Dr. Melmed? Can I bring my child to Lafayette, and my grandchild, and see?" Or a doc who I've known forever, or even St. Mary's coaches have students who come in from different countries to play ball, and I do a lot of testing of athletes as well who have had learning disabilities and qualify under NCAA regulations. So I'll get calls from coaches, and they'll say, "Gee, I know, I'm so sorry about your, I've heard so much about what happened in your family, but if you can just see this student for me, I'd really appreciate it." So I still do testing, but I gave my office, gave the practice, gave my clinic to someone that I hired 35 years ago. And I said, "Here's the key." And she said, "What?" I said, "No, it's yours. I'm not going to sell it to you. It's yours. It's yours." And I said, on one condition, that if I ever feel like I want to see a family or have to see a student, that I could arrange a schedule, and I'll just use the office. She said, "Is that all?" So there will be a Melmed Learning Clinic, it seems like, maybe for another 25 or 30 or who knows how many years that she'll be doing this. And it's a good thing because it's again provided a lot of help for a lot of students through the years. The Chamber of Commerce wasn't so involved in professional offices, professional practices. They were very much more interested in businesses in town, which was fine. And then they started to reach out, which was a good thing, and started to recognize the fact that, like I told you, so many wonderful pediatric practices in this town, and other professionals, who psychologists and psychiatrists and people like myself who are doing work. They started to recognize that these are really businesses as well, although they're professional businesses. And so I think the Chamber has been very supportive of encouraging other professionals to open their practices here. I'm probably one of the few that maybe live in Lafayette and have had a professional business in Lafayette for so many years. I can remember one, his name is Tim Ward, and he's a architect, and he lives, his kids used to play on my wife's team. But he's had a practice here for years and years and years as well, and lives here in Lafayette. There's a last thing I want to talk about. I don't know if you have any other questions, but there's the kids used to come here. This is a fun story. Granny Goose was a bakery that made pretzels, and they made a lot of potato chips and Frito-Lay and that kind of stuff. And there used to be a Granny Goose truck that would make deliveries at Luckies, and then they would stop at some restaurants, and then they would come to the Melmed Learning Clinic on Dewing Avenue. The same guy who made the delivery at Lucky, twice a week, would come to the Melmed Learning Clinic and drop off a 7-pound box of pretzels. So I used to give, after every class, a student would come, and we used to work in groups of 4 or less, and there were eight classrooms, 8 little clinic teaching areas, with 4 kids in every class. Mm-hmm. At one point I had 3 clinics, 25 people on the staff. We used to see 250 kids a week. This is the largest private learning tutoring and testing diagnostic clinic in Northern California. There's one larger than this in Southern California, in Camarillo, private. There are franchises, like the Reading Game and Sylvan Learning and those kind of places, but a freestanding private learning clinic only in Lafayette, and this is the biggest one in all of Northern California. So Granny Goose used to come. After every class, I would give a little cup full of pretzels and sugarless gum. That was a treat afterwards. So when a kid came to the clinic, think about it if you were yourself, right? You'd come twice a week, sometimes on BART, sometimes your mom would drive you, drop you off at the clinic, you do this thing with a tutor. After a while, it becomes pretty much of a drag. So the only reason you come here is maybe for the pretzels and sugarless gum. I would always know how business was going when if I had to miss one delivery because I had too many pretzels, then I knew, wait a minute. Not enough kids here. Mm-hmm. The delivery guy used to get a kick out of it. Why am I stopping at this place? What do you guys do here? It was really fun. It was fun to do that. And it was all right off Mount Diablo Boulevard. But I knew that particularly the more macho kind of guys, when they started doing better at the clinic, and that doing better means that they were getting super grades in school. And I would start cutting the tutoring down to maybe once a week, whatever, and then release them. And they would do fine. And so when they were getting better, they would, instead of taking the pretzels or the gum, they'd say to me, I don't think I need any today. Which means they finally... they got onto my gag, which is, I know why you're coming here. You're coming here for pretzels, right? But no longer. Now you can do it on your own. So it's a wonderful place to be. My wife and I still live in the same house. Our kids, of course, are gone. And hopefully be able to stay there for a long time. I've seen the city change quite a bit. Not so much for the residents. They still seem to be doing pretty much the same, although now there's more senior housing. Mm-hmm. There's opportunities there will be, for lower income folks to come in and have a place to live in this beautiful town, which I'm all in favor of. Mm-hmm. There's the traffic is horrendous. To get folks in and out of here is tough. Support for schools. As you know, Kalani's high school district is the number 1 district in the state of California. Mm-hmm. And within that district, Miramani High School is the best. Kalani's the second, Campo third, and then Los Lomas. Of those high schools, against any other high schools in the whole state, it's tremendous. And to have 2 of those high schools, so close, and the three high, all of those so close to this downtown area. Mm-hmm. The kids here are really super kids who are desirous of wanting to do well, and many of them are wanting to move back here. but its affordability becomes an issue. So I know on my own street of Spring Hill Road, there's two families. One has sold their house to their son, and I remember the son when he was like he was born. My neighbor, in fact, he lives there now with his wife, and she's going to have her second child, and he was there when he was a little 2-year-old. So he bought his dad's house, and then another, they're still living at home because they can't afford to live, so they're in transition. So I would hope that... and I know they're coming back here. My own daughter would love to live in Lafayette, where she was raised, but they live in San Francisco. So it says a lot for a city that's been around for so long that the next generation through wants to come back and inhabit the place they grew up. I would imagine that when you look across the country in towns, that most, I don't know most, but a lot of people can't wait to get out of town or go to other places. But in other words, it's going to be here. And I think with Bart here, Lafayette's going to be here a long time. With a city council that still tries to protect the semi-rural feeling and flavor of the place. They're the watchdogs for what happens here. For families who want to build 10,000 square foot houses, they're saying no. It's not in keeping with what this is all about. Controversial things that go on in this town. The opposition to building 320 units or 80 units off of Deer Hill Road and the freeway and 24 and Pleasant Hill Road. It was just an uproar. We can't do that. It's not that what this town is. Is that exclusiveness or is that a lack of inclusiveness? It's what it is. I think it's a preservation of a sense of well-being for those folks who are here. And is it discriminatory, or is it? These are hard issues for small towns. But the best thing that ever happened to the town was in the general plan to include the ridgeline and hillside ordinance, which says that you can't build a home on a ridgeline in this town or a hillside 250 feet on either side of the ridge, so that a person who lives low or a person who lives high, everybody has an opportunity to see open space. And I think that for a feeling of comfort, more towns need to start doing that. You can go to other cities that are very close to here. You can't have every city look like Daly City. And if you allow that to happen, all these hills will be filled up with homes right away. I'm a very good friend of the director who's going to be retiring soon of Save Mount Diablo. So to be able to drive on 24 and to just look out and see a place that's open is terribly important for a sense of comfort. And we're so fortunate to be able to do that. So I'm grateful for all that, all these years. Like I say, I'm 73 years old, and this has been a good run for me. I don't look 73, right?
No.
Yeah. So.
I'm curious. You mentioned the Luckies was where the Whole Foods is now, and the Diablo Foods, I guess, was there. So was there much in between those? Like you mentioned the Seafood Grotto. Where was that in relation to those?
The Seafood Grotto was across the street from Diablo Foods.
Oh, okay.
And Diablo Foods is in the same street as Dewing Avenue. The post office was always there. My first office before Dewing Avenue was right half a block further south on Dewing Avenue, and that was the first library in town, like in the early 1920s, I think. It was this little place on Dewing and Bickerstaff, and that was an office space. Sheldon Cook's office was around there, and the rest of it was a lot of open spaces. The clock tower that's there now, where the Radio Shack and all of that. Not much happened in that space. Then you'd have to come all the way down the street past the Luckies store and going east on Mount Diablo Boulevard, kind of around where U.S. Bank is now on the corner, and where across the street from the library. Across the street from the library, one block down, was Sambo's. And so all the way from the post office to Sambo's, there really wasn't much happening except the Lucky store. And it was, quite a feeling of, there were some small restaurants, there was Chinese food, and you could get some, we'd have to go take the kids to Walnut Creek to a McDonald's that was it's just recently closed, actually.
Go past that.
Yeah, that's where the McDonald's was, in Walnut Creek, and I remember when that first opened, actually. So it was a pretty lazy town. Weekends you'd see ball games all the time, all the ball games. Everybody was playing ball somewhere, and girls and boys, super fun and competitive, but at the same time the game was over, and like I said, because these kids knew each other, they were always pretty much in the same place, so it was really fun. And that was Mount Diablo Boulevard. Yeah. Just to me, it was like another street. Yeah, it was busy, but it wasn't. Everything else was like neighborhood.
So there were literally open space. There weren't houses or anything along there.
Not on Mount Diablo Boulevard.
So we'd have Diablo Foods, and there'd be a big open. Then I assume that's
open lot. They were lots. They were open lots.
Okay.
And then, yeah, and I think the. Yeah, there was a you get your sweatshirts here. People would a lot of the shopping was done. I mean, I don't remember going anywhere. We used to get you get your food here, you get your gasoline here, you get pretty much everything was just here. No need to run around to places. The Park Theater.
Okay.
Once in a while, be a good movie there. Most of the time, not. And no, it would be more driving because of the ball games again. It'd be more driving into Burton Valley, or then Happy Valley, or these were sort of like arteries off of Mount Diablo Boulevard. So the reason you would cross Mount Diablo Boulevard is to get to some neighborhood to play ball.
Okay.
Yeah.
And when it started in your time here since 1970, when did you start to see those lots being filled in? Was there a specific like only in the 90s or really recently or something?
Yeah, I think that was a big shift, and when the Safeway store went in, that was a big deal, and that sort of changed the flavor of it, because the Roundup Saloon was there, and a couple of other little places, and then nicer restaurants and more ethnic mix of restaurants brought in a really nice balance of. So you weren't just doing American food, you could have fun trying different sort of things. It brought in a lot more people from other communities to eat here, and that's just continued to grow over time for the better. And I think then the watch repair guys came in, and then electronic guys came in, and the Veterans Hall, which is where the library is now, there was always a larger. There was an older, quote, older group of folks who would come in for their activities at the Veterans Hall, and then that moved all the way down to the west side of town with the new Veterans Building, beautiful. And they tore down the Veterans Building and put up the library. But that's all very, very recent, relatively recently compared to what. So the growth was exponential after, in the early 90s, okay. And then it really started to expand toward the end of the 90s and the early 2000s, into town. But again, because the city council and those people who were involved were really, they just didn't let it go crazy. They really watched this hillside and ridgeline ordinance. Mm-hmm. So yes, the downtown is expanding, and more services are available, and wonderful things are happening, but the people who live here can still have a sense of open space. Mm-hmm. And that's what makes the town super unique. It's always been like that. So, yeah.
You had also mentioned your road was, when you first moved, was all torn out, or was a gravel road, or you said something like that. And was the area already developed at that time? Like there were already houses, or you were just kind of coming?
In my own street? Okay, so Pleasant Hill Road was always Pleasant Hill Road. Mm-hmm. And I worked on some committees and commissions as well to, it's a road of regional significance. Mm-hmm. That is, if Highway 24 gets blocked somehow, then how are the folks from Pittsburgh and Antioch and Martinez and Brentwood, how do they get to San Francisco? Mm-hmm. Well, you can go 680 and all the way around to 580, or you come the back way and you would come through Pleasant Hill Road. Mm. That's a 4-lane, and there was a move, and probably someday it may not end. We may lose, but so far we've prevailed to keep that the way it is. It's always super crowded in the morning, horribly crowded in the afternoon, right? A lot of people coming in and out. They're still trying to go the back way to get off of the freeway. The move in the transportation is in the Caltrans is to open that up maybe to a 6-lane road, a regionally significant highway that would come through the east end of Lafayette. We've opposed that. There's 2 schools there. Mm-hmm. That's allowed us to keep a handle on it, because that's a lot of cars now. Can you imagine 2 more lanes and increase the speed to 45 or 50 miles an hour? So we've tried to hold on to that. Spring Hill School was torn down and then rebuilt. Our kids never got a chance to go to the new school. Kalani's High School, a lot of renovation there. Our kids were going to the old Kalani's. But I would come up, as soon as you get off Pleasant Hill Road and you go up Spring Hill Road, at the end of that is Brioni's and the Girl Scout camp. And the road becomes a private road, plus about 7/10 of a mile from off of Pleasant Road is a private road, and so it was up to the homeowners to maintain it. There's 250 homes about from Spring Hill School all the way back to the Girl Scout camp, and those 250 is called Spring Hill Valley Homeowners Association. I've been on the association board for years and years, and we've really tried to hold that to make that road accessible. And finally, there was some extra money that came from the city of Lafayette, and there was some matching stuff that came in, and so the road was finally paved, and now there are sidewalks on either side. But all that time, I mean, for 40 years, because I think it just happened in the last 15 years, let's say. So for 40 years or so, that was just bumpy. I remember when we came out to look at our house, the potholes and the dirt and all that, all the way up. And families used to come to visit us. They always knew they'd have to drive so slowly to get there. Kids would walk. Our kids would always walk, on the rough Spring Hill Road. So that's all resurfaced. In the summertime, there's each week of the summer, there's 125 girls, different girls each week go to the Girl Scout camp. So the people, mostly moms, who drive up Spring Hill Road, have quite an experience. Now that it's paved, it's pretty cool. But in the old days, all those people would come up and drop off their girls for Girl Scout camp and that still goes on today. So I've seen a lot of changes there, and I think the city's moving in the right direction. It's hard to get bonds passed, but they will, and it has been doing a little bit better to take care of the infrastructure here in Lafayette, particularly roads. But again, I guess if you did an aerial over the city, you probably it wouldn't look too different. I mean, I look at old pictures from the early 1900s, of course, and but now it's pretty much the same. Looks pretty much the same. I remember seeing a picture of before the freeway came in. That all that was just open from one side to the other, and then whoever made the decision, where do you actually put that freeway and how does it meander? Interesting. And then BART had to decide, where it puts its location. That of course changes flow, but our area, the Spring Hill area, is pretty much looks pretty much the same as it did. The homes that are there are still there. People are doing pop-up homes now, where they change the front and maybe they put a second story on it, but the footprints are exactly the same as they were then. In the old days, this was Indian territory would come through and move cattle and walnut orchards were here, and move all of that as fast as they could down to Martinez and get it in the water and take it in boats and move it around. So, that was in the old days. Now, what it's going to be 50 years from now, I'm not, nobody knows for sure. But if at least my little run here for so many years is an indication, I think it'll probably have that same feeling. Hopefully, 50 years from now. Good schools, wonderful people, and inviting businesses to do their thing, but not to be so ostentatious that we end up looking like Pleasant Hill or Walnut Creek. But it'll continue to have that semi-rural feel.
You mentioned now they're becoming pop. So all the houses on your road back in 1975 were basically single story. They all were kind of similar types of houses back then.
Yeah, and the builder, Marchand, was a big-time builder here. And we happened to live in a two-story house. And the woman who built the house, she wanted the best builder, who was Marchand at the time, but she wanted a two-story Cape Cod house. So she got what she wanted, and I used to hear stories about how the battles went on because he had the one-story ranch style fireplace in the house, that sort of thing, and that's the way it was. So many of those homes look like that. If you go up Spring Hill Road, or if you go even in Silverwood, other places around here, all the homes look like they did back then. Now the young families that are coming in are just change up the landscape, and again change the front, put on some shutters, and maybe if they can put a second story on it. But I haven't seen many, if any, just complete tear downs and rebuild. if they're lucky enough to get an open lot, they'll build a house. But in many communities that in the other parts of the country, people just buy the house, rip it up, and then just start it over again. That doesn't seem to happen very much here. I don't think that really happens. I think they keep the feeling the same way, and that's probably because of the design review committee and the planning commission and the city council. They just have this plan in mind of what the city is going to continue to look like. Yeah.
In your time, you remember the original Akalanis. You said your children went there. And how different is it now to the current Akalanis, or is it basically the same? Just the buildings are kind of
the building itself,
or the area, the campus.
Yeah, the fields are better. Tennis courts are better. Swimming pool's exactly the same. They have the sections, different wings. What we were concerned about when my kids were there was the asbestos.
And that was about 70s, 80s?
Exactly. In the 80s, because let's say they got there. Yeah, the last youngster that our kids graduated in 95. So there was identification early on about was this a safe place, and then in the 90s, early 90s, a lot of revisions going on, and then it was. I still can remember huge trucks coming out with the guys with their protective gear on, with that plastic mask, asbestos, and they were removing with these trucks that looked like dump trucks, suctioning out. You hear this loud noise, and that was going on. They were protected while the kids were in class.
Yeah.
Whoa. I wasn't sure about all of that. Yeah. But the classrooms look so much better. I mean, the whole school looks so much better now. The small gym, the little gym, that took a long time to be renovated. I mean, when our kids were there, the tiles used to come off from the floor. There were many times you couldn't hold ball games there because it was dangerous. You didn't know what was going to fall from the ceiling. But just it goes to show you, though, but it was always the best school. It was always, great education going on. Yeah.
So the layout is basically the same. They're just
exactly the same.
Okay.
There is nothing that. No, the classrooms, all the sections are still there. Nothing's been changed. The parking lot is there. The gym is the same. Yeah, they're both. Everything's the same.
And the remodel was in the late 90s. Is that?
Yeah.
Okay.
Let's see. Oh yeah, late 90s for sure. Because 95, our kids were still there, so it had to happen late 90s, maybe early 2000, probably late 90s. Yeah, and all for the better. I mean, looks very nice. Looks great. Yeah. The drama section is just beautiful, and they used to just use drama in the cafeteria. That's where the practices were held. So that's a super wing now, and the gym looks great. It's just. I don't know if you've driven by there, but anytime, day or night, there's just tons and tons of people. Its location, during the summer, for example, when all the swimming meets go on, county meets go there, thousands of people in and out during the summer. Not hundreds, thousands come through here. And the school closes at whatever time. The last class might be at, say, 4 o'clock or something like that. But at 7 o'clock, it just fills up again with adult education all the time. And weekends, it's full of athletic activities, So it's used a tremendous amount of use in that space there. Yeah, it's great.
And just curious, you mentioned a lot of baseball games and things like that when you were. Do you remember other events, like weekend, just pass the time kind of events, whether it be church related? You meant Girl Scouts, Boy Scouts, and things like that, and other things like that, or community groups that you went to.
Well, scouting was a big deal, and there were several Cub Scout troops, and then Boy Scout troops, and of course, as they got, I think it'd be interesting to know. And I guess if you read any local newspaper you read now, the Lafayette Sun, this time of year, you start to see how many Eagle Scouts are come in to become Eagle Scouts. So there just seem like so many still, and that used to be the case then too. It's probably just a great place for the Scouting Association, because these are people that commit. That's a lot. That's a lot of parental involvement at the early stage, and then for kids to commit to that, for as busy as they are, and many of them are super students, and they play musical instruments, they do everything, and then they're, by the way, an Eagle Scout. So, and that was the case way back then. I just remember some really valedictorians from Kalani High School were Eagle Scouts too. So, Scouting was a very big deal here, and we used to have the derby, what used to call it? They would make cars and
like a push cart or go kart,
and have derby races, and then they would make little models, and that was a community event where the winners from each of the troops and the Cub Scout groups would get together, and the winning cars would compete against other cars, and then have a big picnic and deal afterwards. The Spring Hill School, and then Lafayette Elementary School, and Happy Valley School. They all do their family spring back to they do the back to school night. That was always a huge outing, and then they would do picnics for families, usually on a Friday afternoon, a late afternoon, and so all the schools started doing these family picnics. We, like I say, we're involved in all of the, obviously all of the sporting activities. Church groups have always been open to having community events. The Temple Isaiah, the Presbyterian Church, all of those were open places for people to hold different types of activities for their own, other clubs and associations. So the churches have always been, part of this community, supportively, not isolated at all. I didn't get the sense there was any isolation, a welcoming kind of feeling here. And what else did we used to do? There was Buckeye Ranch used to have horses and riding stables there, and the guy's name was Bob Kinney, and he was the rancher, and he would have classes for riders, and that went on for a long time. And then it closed. There's now is no horseback riding up there. We were involved in a group that kept Briones, that area, open space. There were some developers that wanted to come in 2002 and build 127 homes at the end of Spring Hill Road. There's a group in Moraga that's been trying to keep open space and not build huge developments as well. And that's just part of that sense of openness that we have here, open spaceness that we have here.
Thank you very much.
I hope it's been informative.
It's been great. Wonderful.
Good. Okay.
The interview ends at 11:15 a.m.